down. Put the phone down. Put the phone down. Easy.
So it was Frank, wasn't it?
He had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, sure he did. I knew there was more between y'all than just some backdoor romance. He probably pimped you out the court in the first place. Hey, we going to the police.
No.
Come on.
No.
Yeah, why don't you scream, huh?
How can I call? Every single day you make me and my children late for our lives with this your stupid parking. Say parking happen. And today you have the audacity to make me out to be the villain. Move this car now, Kafi. Move this car now.
You want to see a mad person? Don't worry, you'll find the same person that will come and move this car. You'll find the same person that will come and move.
Shake ya, move this car.
We're adding new titles every day to our awesome collection of blockbuster movies. Download the app and subscribe. This isn't just a streaming channel. This is a bold new world of entertainment. Arise Play. Beyond streaming.
A very warm welcome to this week, 60 minutes of analytical review of the big stories, topical issues and all the controversies around the world. I'm Somna Sambo. And now to the headlines. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, in his first visit to sub-Saharan Africa, visits Kenya, Nigeria and Senegal to counter the growing influence of China and Russia on the continent. And new policy for Africa unveiled by the United States as Blinken confirms readiness to collaborate with African countries in the areas of security, health, infrastructure, good governance and human rights, says Nigeria's status as leader of the continent remains unshaken. And US urges Nigeria to ensure accountability and address the grievances of the ENDSARS victims, as Blinken says Washington will work closely with Nigeria to help those displaced by insurgency in the northeast of the country. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, in his first official trip to sub-Saharan Africa, is visiting Kenya, Nigeria and Senegal. Blinken's three-nation tour of Africa is a deliberate attempt to shore up U.S. profile amidst growing influence of China and Russia on the continent. While in Nigeria, he met with Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari in Abuja with issues of collaboration on international health, security, expanding energy access, sustenance of democracy and other issues discussed. Analysts say Blinken's visit to Africa is the reality of Washington's global struggle with Beijing and Moscow over influence on the continent. China and Russia's influence in Africa have grown over the last decades, with huge infrastructural projects funded across many African countries, despite U.S. improvement in funding the distribution of vaccine and other aid to tackle coronavirus.
Nigeria touches us every day in America through the amazing power of its diaspora. Musicians, writers, artists, entrepreneurs, athletes enrich our lives, make them more interesting, more rewarding, and we're grateful for that as well. Our meetings today, the engagements that I'll have throughout my time here in Nigeria, reflect the depth of this partnership of now more than 6 decades, and the way that our collaboration is vital, and maybe more vital than ever, to tackling shared challenges and actually delivering results for our people, which is what our responsibility really is. Let me just touch on a few of the issues that we've been talking about today and where our cooperation is especially important. First, we're working together to beat back COVID-19 and to build back better as we address the devastating impact that it's had on all of us, on our communities, on our economies.
All right. right. To discuss these issues is Dr. Humphrey Ojiako, who is Nigeria's former permanent representative to the United Nations. He's also a former Nigerian ambassador to Switzerland. And also joining me virtually from Lagos is a political and communication expert, Dr. Tayo Popola. He also lectures at the University of Lagos. We shall be joined later on the show from the United Kingdom by Adewale Ajadi, a public affairs analyst. Gentlemen, welcome. So let me start with you, Ambassador.
Thank you.
Here we have the United States government trying to rejig its presence in Africa. There's this growing influence of China on the continent, and statistics actually say for every 4 projects coming onto the continent in terms of FDI too, about 3 of them are actually coming from China, and 1 may come from the US, UK, or so on. So what's your overview of Blinken's visit on this during this period, and the most important message that we should take from this 3-nation tour?
Thank you, Sambo, for having me here. The Blinken visit is significant simply because it's mostly a correctional diplomacy from what has been happening to both multilateralism and bilateral diplomacy under President Trump in the past 4 years before Mr. Biden took over. So it appears that President Biden, through his Secretary of State, is trying to rejig and reset the tone of American diplomacy, and probably we haven't seen any more signs yet in the area of substance. Probably this visit will lead us to begin to watch and see what happens to the substance of America's relations with the African continent, and of course the individual countries that make up Africa. One thing I have to note early is that Africa is a continent. It is not a country.
A country. I mean, yeah, I almost felt the same way too during his speech.
Precisely. So this tendency to bulk African countries together and give them, say, some kind of brush them with the same brush and say it is good for Africa. I do not think that there is an exact coincidence between the interests of, say, Nigeria and Kenya or Senegal. Yes, we have a common historical background, we have common experiences, and we have sometimes some common cultural and religious affinities and stuff like that. But that does not make our political and the economic or social interests to exactly coincide one with the other.
Very interesting. Let's have Dr. Popola and hear his own view of Blinken's visit. And what do you make of this 3-nation tour, and what's the strongest message that you think the U.S. is trying to send this time around?
Yeah, thank you very much. The Secretary of State's visit to Nigeria is very, very strategic. Strategic in the sense that you are aware that in the post-independent Nigeria, Nigeria remains a topmost country in the American foreign policy when it comes to U.S. policy in Africa. And considering the background information that you gave at the beginning of this program concerning the domineering influence of China in Africa these days. So if America, under the leadership of the current president from a Democratic Party, we know that the Democratic Party, they are usually our friends in Africa. So if it shows that the current administration in the US, they are very, very strategic, and they are very, very serious about their foreign policy, enunciation, articulation, and implementation. And if they are working on providing a new framework of foreign policy in Africa, Nigeria is very, very strategic. Nigeria is very, very critical. Nigeria is very, very important. And that is what is responsible to this visit. And I would like to say that Nigeria should seize this opportunity maximally by convincing the US that Nigeria remains your ally in the areas of economic, in the area of promotion of democracy, promotion of human rights, and so on and so forth. So I'm so excited. I'm so happy about this visit. And it shows that the American government, they are very, very serious about Nigeria with the visit, sir. You will agree with me that during the administration of President Trump, this kind of opportunity, we never enjoyed this type of opportunity. Now that we have this opportunity today, we should seize the opportunity maximally.
We've got there. Let's talk about this translating to full-time investments, supporting African countries to curb insecurity. What do you think are the concrete alternatives that the U.S. is providing, considering that China and Russia are rushing in to ensure that, they continue to increase their influence on the continent?
We are having two perspectives at hand, the U.S. and China. Permit me to use this word, that they're fond of saying that the devil you know is better than the devil that you don't know. We have been with the U.S. The U.S. has been with us in the post-independent Nigeria. And we understand them. We have the pattern of trade between Nigeria and the U.S. over the years, irrespective of the person at the end of affairs, except during the period of June 12 lockdown, that the U.S. imposed some sanctions on Nigeria. Besides this period, the U.S. has consistently been an ally, of Nigeria when it comes to development, promotion of economy, promoting human rights, promoting democracy. Look at the issue of HIV/AIDS. That HIV/AIDS, we know how supportive they have been. The period of Ebola, we knew how supportive they were. Now we know that with the coming of the U.S. today, don't go with whatever they say they want to do. I'm more comfortable and at home dealing with the U.S. than the Chinese, because we know, what the two countries, are, and what we as a sovereign nation state, what we stand to gain. So this is my own perspective.
All right. Just hold on there, and I want you, Ambassador, to react to that. How much comfortable are you with the United States compared to the influence of Russia and China? I mean, China's influence is so tremendous. They give us loans, and the Nigerian government has been consuming those loans, and our appetite for loans keeps increasing.
Honestly, Shola, I would like to put it slightly differently. And the different way to put it is, we often say Africa has come of age. I do not think that we should be continuing to put ourselves in a place where we are always at the center of global contest for power. I think Africa deserves to be a major autonomous player in the context of global politics.
Okay, just hold on that. When we come back from this break, we'll talk so much about that, because it aligns with the new U.S. policy for the continent. Well, we'll now go on a short break. When we come back, we'll continue this discourse. Welcome back. You're still watching This Week on the Rise News. Now, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, during his visit, unveiled a new policy for Africa in the Nigerian capital, Abuja, furthering cooperation on global health, security, trade, expanding energy access and economic growth, and revitalizing democracy. The new U.S. policy for Africa comes after a 4-year tension between former President Trump's administration and Africa. Blinken said too many times African countries have been treated as junior partners in international diplomacy and that the situation needs to change. He says the U.S. firmly believes that it's time to stop treating Africa as a subject of geopolitics and start treating it as a major geopolitical player that it has become. In Nigeria, Blinken made it clear that Washington wanted to partner with African countries because it is mutually beneficial. He also says Nigeria's leadership of the continent remains undisputed. Analysts say the Biden administration believes the 4 years of Donald Trump's administration has greatly hurt the relationship between U.S. and the continent, and the government is now willing to mend fences.
What happens here in Nigeria is felt around the world. And that, in a nutshell, is why I've come to Abuja. The United States knows that on most of the urgent challenges and opportunities we face, Africa will make the difference. As we work to end the COVID-19 pandemic and strengthen global health security, we must work closely with the countries of Africa to build public health systems here that can prevent, detect, and respond to future emergencies. Because, as these past 2 years have taught us, none of us are completely protected unless all of us are protected. As the urgency of the climate crisis grows, our focus will increasingly be on Africa to solve an emergency that threatens our collective security, our economies, and our health. Here, where the potential for renewable energy is greater than anywhere else on the planet, we see not only the stakes of this crisis, but also its solutions.
All right, I still have with me on the program Dr. Humphrey Ojiako, Nigeria's former permanent representative to the United Nations and also former Nigerian ambassador to Switzerland. And from the University of Lagos, Dr. Tayo Popola, who is a political and communication expert. Ambassador, just before we continue, during this period, Blinken, actually made this statement that our Africa policy is about Africa and not about China. But he went on to actually say that too often international infrastructure deals are opaque, coercive, burden countries with unmanageable debt, are environmentally destructive, and don't always benefit the people who actually live there. Do you think this was a dig at China?
Well, the contest between the United States and China for who's going to be the top dog in the globe, in the world, is obvious for everyone to see. But my interest is Nigeria's, and of course by extension Africa's place in it. I do not think it is fair for us Africans to allow ourselves to be put in a position to be choosing between the East or the West, between China and the United States, or anyone else for that matter. I think African countries we can play our role in the international community as equal partners, both with China and the United States.
But well, Africans keep looking up to these countries for foreign direct investments and all of that.
The thing with foreign direct investment is often that it is not something that is given out of sheer goodwill or kindness or love. FDI pursues profit. It is not a charity. What we should be seeking is conducive environment, conducive domestic environment to attract external capital. And it will come
including that from the diasporan Africans.
Particularly, and that is an undermined source of capital for Africa's growth and development. That is what we call diaspora remittances. These remittances come mostly from Western countries, the United States included. Yes, we get a lot of loans and investment that is tied to loans from China, which is not a bad thing. But again, if Africa can put its own house in order, do the necessary savings that need to be done, check issues of corruption and misuse of public resources, obviously, we will be able to collaborate with China in a more profitable way for both sides. Okay. Because China is not here for charity.
Definitely.
The United States is not here for charity.
US too.
And let me say one thing else.
Okay.
What Mr. Blinken is bringing about is not exactly new United States foreign policy to Nigeria, to Africa. Because if you think back in 2010, Nigeria signed a unique agreement with the United States. It was called the Bilateral Commission.
Yes, yes.
And everything that Blinken mentioned here was contained almost verbatim in the Binational Commission. Its discontinuity is what Nigeria should be digging at. So let us open it up, let us expand it, and let us exploit it.
Okay, very quickly, let's go back to Dr. Popola. In all of this, you could hear the Biden administration saying that they will continue with some policies of the Trump administration, like the Prosper Africa program, and then the AGOA Act, which was put in place by the Clinton administration. And you could see Blinken actually trying to espouse how Nigeria is very important. Do you think that Nigeria has come of age, if we may borrow that statement from the late Murtala Muhammad, although he was saying that Africa has come of age, but this time around, with these statements being made categorically by Blinken, it's sounding like Nigeria is at the centerpiece of the U.S. foreign policy on Africa.
Like I said earlier on, Nigeria is very, very strategic to any American government's foreign policy. Strategic in the sense that Nigeria is the giant of Africa. And this Nigeria has done over the years with contributions to the development of other African countries. Even in the history of the global world politics, Nigeria has made an impact to the extent that any government in the US negotiating foreign policy in Africa, we have to reckon with the position of Nigeria. So that is number one statement. The second statement is that you made allusions to the previous administration in the US. Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, and to the current Biden's administration. That is what we call continuity in administration. Irrespective of the fact that whether it is the Democratic Party that is at the helm of affairs or it is the Republican Party, the policy that has already been enunciated in the interest of in the overall interest of Americans must be continued. This is a laudable policy that is worthy of emulation by Nigeria and other African countries, because we don't have that culture of continuing with good policies of the previous administrations. Rather, when we have a new administration in the country, what has been our experience is to abandon the good policies of that government and start our own. That has not really helped us in advancing.
Very quickly, Dr. Popola, let's talk about the issue of democracy that Blinken raised, that democracy is witnessing a recession on the continent and some bigger countries are beginning to lose their foothold. What do you have to say about that?
Yes, I want Nigeria to put a house in order. For America to support democratic growth in Nigeria, you will agree with me that we have not worked hard enough to deepen democracy since restoration of civil rule in 1999. Rather, every election that is conducted in Nigeria takes us backward 2 steps, 3 steps, and more than that.
All right.
Look at the disturbing problem of vote buying. How do we solve many of those problems that we have identified, militating against good democracy in Nigeria?
We just have to go on break now. Dr. Popola, just stay along with us. We'll be bringing Adewale Ajadi, and when we come, we'll be switching in between both of you. Just stay with us as we go on this short break.
It's all right. It's all right.
Welcome back. You're still watching This Week on the Rise News, where we hold the best of conversations and analysis. I'm Sumner Sambo, and we're still discussing the new policy of the United States for Africa, which was revealed in the Nigerian capital, Abuja, by the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken. And in this very critical policy, the U.S. is saying that it will do new things. But my guests here have been saying that most of the things that have been mentioned by Mr. Blinken actually contained in the U.S.-Nigeria Binational Commission that was earlier signed sometime around 2010. And of course, Ambassador Ojiako made this statement earlier on. Let me still come back to you on that particular statement. When you hear the United States of America saying that African countries should not be treated as junior partners during international diplomacy, what do you think it's trying to say? And how can we, make something good out of it as a continent and have a stronger voice and maybe even have a permanent representation at the UN Security Council?
Mr. Sambo, that diplomacy is also a function of power, is projection of power. So it is not for the United States or China or any other country to confer on Nigeria or on the African continent the status of an equal partner in global affairs. It is the sole responsibility of African governments and the African peoples, African countries, to exert their sovereignty,
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. How do we exploit this kind of goodwill that we have now to actually have a seat at the UN Security Council?
And that's what I'm explaining, that it is not a function of goodwill. It's a function of power. It's what you can do. It's not what people wish for you to be able to do. So, to build our power, to build our strength, I think my friend from the University of Lagos has already mentioned something about resetting our own country, making ourselves stronger, our economy stronger, our politics stable, our environment conducive for global activities, investment, and all of that. If we achieve a coherent domestic policy that is sustainable, that is efficient, and achievement-driven, the world will come around and respect us.
You think Nigeria can emerge a superpower?
And Nigeria
take advantage of
Nigeria is one of the few countries in the world, and I say this very seriously. Nigeria is one of the few countries in the world that is so endowed with everything, every aspect, every element that makes a country or a nation great. Our capacity to exploit these things, whether you call it in terms of natural resources, abundance of human beings, who could be turned into human assets. Because human beings in themselves are not a productive source of growth and importance. It is how you convert them into powerful assets, into assets of growth, into assets of development, and assets of relevance in the global community. Nigerians outside Nigeria are doing so very well. If Nigerians within Nigeria itself can do equally well, the combination of these two elements, Nigerians in the diaspora, Nigerians in the home country, all of them doing well and combining, cooperating to lift Nigeria up, there will be very few countries in the world worthy of living more than this country.
I've been told that Adewale Ajadi is joining us from London now. Mr. Adewale Ajadi, what do you make of Mr. Blinken's visit to sub-Saharan Africa generally, before we go into the deep issues that he has laid out?
A world that's changed in terms of becoming more multipolar. And Nigeria can be, as other guests have mentioned, can be a very significant player in that. And the new administration, or the newer administration in the United States, is increasingly aware of that. And as you have already pointed out, there are many things that we can do to enhance our capacity to respond effectively and to decide more proactively what we want to do in our engagement with the Americans. This is a wonderful opportunity to do that, but we cannot be complacent about it.
Support that African countries need from the US. We've got a lot of support from the East, represented by China, and the Russians have seen a loophole because of the US, inability to tap into the opportunities that are available in the past, despite the insecurity and challenges. How do we make the best benefit of this that will be mutually beneficial for the entire continent and then the United States?
Well, I'm delighted that you put it in the way you put it. The recognition of the leverage we have externally to the US in this multipolar world that you have mentioned is significant. We have to be very clear about what we want rather than reacting to the relationship with the US. We especially have to connect more deeply with the African American populace in the US and the Nigerian diaspora populace in the US to make sure that there is clear usage of the things that are significant to the continent. And what are the things that are going to be significant to the continent? The African continent is the youngest continent in the world. And we'll have most of the young people, about half of the young people in the world in this century. The President of the United States said more significantly in the past few weeks that the world is fighting to decide who's going to be the leader in the 21st century. It is time for Nigeria to take up the position as the leader in terms of the ability to connect the wider African aspirations. Remember, the Africans in Europe, the Africans in Canada, and the Africans in Africa and other parts of the world. So being ahead of the curve in being clear about what is significant to the continent in terms of trade, in terms of economy, in terms of culture, and especially in terms of our our soft power. Nigeria is becoming a cultural significant player in the world. We need to leverage these things and be clear about our impacts, the impact that we want from it.
Interesting development there. And I'll come back to you, Ambassador. What Blinken had said during the unveiling of that new US Africa policy is that Nigeria could actually leverage on its strength to see how it can help promote peace and stability in other countries. Do you think that we have the resources, the clout, considering the domestic problems that we have right now, to see how we can intervene in other countries like we did, in the 90s, going into Sierra Leone, Liberia, and all of that? Or we should just concentrate on our domestic issues?
I think what the Nigerian government should take away immediately from that Tony Blinken statement is to challenge them to now collaborate with us. I do not like this word assist, because if they recognize that Nigeria is so important within the framework of the United States strategic interest around the world and in Africa in particular, then the foremost interest of the United States should coincide with that of Nigeria, which is to overcome insurgency, to overcome terrorism, to overcome banditry. And
they've done that by selling 12 Super Tucanos
to
us. What more do you think that they can do, especially in the areas of insurgency?
A whole lot. To overcome an insurgency is not just a function of using Tucano aircraft to bomb people and so on. There's a lot of intelligence technology required. And I'm not so sure that the Nigerian armed forces is getting that level of intelligence required to contain these people, because
that's because there are allegations of human rights violation by the military and all of that, just like we have the ENDSARS issues coming up.
I do not believe that the reason the United States or any other country will refuse to collaborate with Nigeria to contain terrorism is because of the fears, anxieties about human rights abuse. Because human rights abuses take place everywhere, including the United States. The important thing is, what do you do when it has happened? Do you just let it go? No, you deal with it and bring the people who are responsible to account. But the frequency with which Nigerian troops are ambushed and killed in the war zone, especially in the northeast, tells you that they do not have the intelligence as they require to avoid such ambushes. They do not have the equipment to overwhelm the enemy when it comes.
A lot of Nigerians are usually surprised because, the U.S. bases are close to the country, and yet when something happens between, for example, the Nigerian borders, the U.S. doesn't share such information easily.
That is where the Nigerian government can now key into this new opportunity of cooperation and collaboration between the United States and Nigeria and Africa in general. Because part of the original agreement between Nigeria and the United States was regional security. That was part of the Binational Commission mandate. So that is something to leverage on and say, let us cooperate and reduce this level of insecurity that is holding Nigeria down from beginning to pursue its potentials.
Very interesting indeed. And let's come to you, Adewale Ajadi. We've seen the U.S. talking about COVID-19, and a lot of people are saying that despite spending so much on providing, COVID vaccines and all of that, the U.S. is just so surprised that the influence of the Chinese and Russians just keeps rising. And the U.S. Secretary of State had to practically state how they are supporting Nigeria and other African countries on the issue of vaccine production, access to vaccines, and all of that. What do you make of that submission?
Well, I think that the U.S. must remember that the world has changed. That the days when they would say something and it would take some time to get to the African populace is long gone. We are aware that they have a surplus of vaccines in the U.S. compared to what they've given for wider international consumption. Even though we are grateful for what they've given, it's very clear that there's a major gap in terms of what can be given to the African continent. So people are savvy enough to know that the charitable givings of the US is not enough to earn it the kind of bully pulpit that it normally has. And so what I think has to happen is the US has to take into consideration the interdependencies. We are talking about a pandemic. It affects the whole of humanity. Why would it be possible for US to have surplus and the African continent has less than 20% covered? That's not reasonable. That is not the work of a friend. That has to be reconsidered. The same thing applies to Canada, by the way. But so these are the things that are very, very clear to people. So words are not good enough. It's actions that matter. And the other thing that is possible for the US to look at and deal with is the capacity of African countries to build their own vaccine generation and manufacturing abilities, especially in relation to something like COVID.
Sorry, we seem to have had a frozen frame there. And I'll just come back to you on this issue of vaccine support for the continent. How critical is that?
It is very critical. The thing about pandemics, and I think Mr. Blinken quite captured that in his statement very well. If you eradicate this COVID-19 pandemic in the United States, and it is still rampant
across the
Europe.
world.
If you eradicate it in Europe and America, and it's still rampant and killing people in Africa, the world miniaturizing every day as a global village, we say, where you cannot avoid contact with the pandemic-stricken countries.
Okay.
So you haven't healed yourself.
Yeah.
So it is in the best interest of the United States also to collaborate. I prefer to use this word collaborate, not assist.
Very interesting indeed. We'll just go on another short break, and when we'll come back, we'll continue and end the show. Stay with us. Come back. Nigeria has been urged to heal the wounds of the Lekki Tollgate ENDSARS incident. The U.S. says the country can do that by ensuring accountability and addressing compensation for ENDSARS victims. A panel of inquiry set up by Lagos State government, among other ones set up by other states, confirms that indeed some person died at Lekki Tollgate on October 20, 2020. During the standoff between protesters and security operatives. Visiting U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says it is important that the issues that resulted to the nationwide strike by youths are looked into and addressed while victims of the crisis are adequately compensated. The U.S. top diplomat says Washington will also work closely with Nigeria to help those displaced by insurgency in the northeast of the country. And I still have with me here Ambassador Humphrey Ojiako, who is Nigeria's former permanent representative to the United Nations, and I have Adewale Ajadi still joining us from London. And Ambassador, I'll talk to you about that. Here we have the U.S. Providing some prescriptions on this ENDSARS panel report that has been making the rounds during the week. And is the U.S. in a better position to actually advise on democracy when it comes to this kind of protests and all of that? I mean, because before the exit of Trump, we could see lots of protesters being tear gassed, lots of things being done against protesters here and there.
You know, the good thing about Mr. Blinken's visit is that it brings back the wind of collaboration in the promotion of democracy that had influenced Africa tremendously in the 1980s and 90s. Now you can see some elements of regression in the democratic sector. And you're beginning to hear about coups again, coup d'etats.
Yeah, I mean, that's why he kept saying that democracy is in recession globally, including even in the United States, considering what happened in January.
The beautiful part of the lessons we ought to learn from the American democracy he's talking about is not whether these bad things happen. They can happen, and they do happen. It is the response of the society. It is the response of the democratic institutions. It's the response of the individuals who've been appointed to take a lead of these institutions meant to protect democracy.
And you think we've made the best response as a country?
In that test, America passed with flying colors, because if you recall, officials appointed by President Donald Trump himself stood up for the Constitution and not for the president who appointed them. That is the strength of democracy. That's institutional strength. The Justice Department, Mr. Barr was supposed to be a very close ally of Mr. Trump. But when it came to going against the Constitution's belief, he said no.
Including former Vice President Mike Pence.
He's the Vice President, including the military, that gave a warning up front that their allegiance is to the Constitution of the United States and not to any individual. A few days ago, our own president, Muhammadu Buhari, informed Blinken or reminded him that the Nigeria has copied the American system, line, hook, and sinker. Well, we want to live up to that commitment, that statement the president made. It is in that light I see the ENDSARS thing, and I salute the courage of the team, of the investigation team, the panel, that at least came out with something we could call their best. They didn't whitewash, they didn't paper it over. There are reports that the report is not as comprehensive as it should be, that it's not so very properly investigated, but at least for the first time, we are getting a report.
It's a starting point.
That exactly.
All right, and I come to you, Adewale Ajadi. You know, I was trying to ask Ambassador here if the U.S. is in the best position to actually advise us on that ENDSARS protest, considering what has been happening with the Black Lives Matter protests that were so rampant during Trump's era, and what happened with the invasion of the Capitol, and all of that. He's given his own perspective, but I would like you to actually tell us yours.
Progress. And certainly the US is no exemplar. We just saw a case decided yesterday that has us reason to pause and think again. But having said that, I think the professor's point is very germane. We must excel beyond even the US, in especially one area, is making sure our democracy is participatory rather than just representative. We have to make sure that those who participated in the panels on ENDSARS find that their voices are not masked and they are understood, and those who are in power listen to them. We have to make sure going forward that young people participate in some form of committee about the future of this country. Anything that dislocates young people, we are going to have an incredible number of young people that kind of understate the potential of that to destabilize good intentions. We have to make sure that we understand, we engage, and we involve them. We have to stop doing things to them. We have to start doing things with them.
Okay.
And that way we would excel more than the US in making sure democracy is relevant and effective.
Now, when he says that democracy is in recession due to the recent coup in Guinea, in Mali, and then, of course, what's happening in Sudan, what do you think is the easiest solution that the US can provide to help restore democracy in those countries and then to prevent military intervention in other countries across the continent?
Well, I think one of the things that the US has never done is to understand the context in which to understand how democracy works. In kinds of multicultural countries we have in Africa, it is extremely important that we organize ourselves passionately to allow diversity to be recognized in our democracy. And I'm not talking about diversity of states. I'm talking about diversity of ethnicities and diversity of the demographic profile, which has never been achieved in the United States. If you really look at the United States, the first time the United States allowed any form of proper democracy is only about 60, 70 years ago when the civil rights movement was effective. So let's not use the US as an example, and he has to listen. The US has to listen and understand the context in the Sudan. What has to be done in the Sudan? Not just fly a kite over the Sudan. He has to understand what has to be done in Guinea. What is the solution in Guinea? It is not a one-size-fits-everybody. We have to start listening, and the US would have to start listening and start finding solutions to that.
Okay.
There are ways in which to ensure that people are involved, and we have to make sure that the people are involved in the governance of their countries.
Interesting. Ambassador, just as we try to round off this conversation, Mr. Blinken made mention of former President Olusegun Obasanjo being the AU's envoy to Ethiopia to resolve the crisis and all of that, showing how Nigeria's resilience can be tapped into to help curb challenges across the continent. What more do you think we can do? Because we don't expect the US to send boots on the ground to help any country, but tapping into the way the US has recognized Nigeria's power on the continent now, do you think it's time to provide more funding, more support for the country to be able to unleash its potentials and resolve conflicts on the continent?
Indeed, that is totally possible, but it has to be framed in a different question. That equation should be collaborate with Africa to help Africa, for Africans to help themselves, not come and help Africa. That doesn't work. The problems in Guinea, in the Sudan, in Mali, can only be solved by Africans. If external influence comes into it in terms of kinetic energy and stuff like that, it eventually exacerbates the problem, it doesn't solve it. So President Obasanjo's foray in Ethiopia is very welcome, but he has to be supported not just by his own home country, which we are proud that the Nigerians speak, they recognize that, but the African Union itself has to be strong enough and respected. And the United States collaborating, not just the United States, other countries, collaborating. I'm afraid, Doctor, that work.
We just have to go at the moment. But just before we go, I would like to read what Mr. Blinken actually said about Nigeria, that what happens here in Nigeria is felt around the world, and that in a nutshell is why I came to Abuja. United States knows that in most of the challenges and opportunities we face, Africa will make a difference. Well, Nigeria being at the centerpiece of the U.S. policy on Africa, and we hope it can only get better. We must thank you so much, Ambassador Humphrey Ojiako, Nigeria's former permanent representative to the United Nations, and then Adewale Ajadi, who joined us from London, and then earlier on we had Dr. Popola, who joined us from the University of Lagos. We must thank you all for joining us here. Well, that's how it's been for this edition of This Week from me and the entire team here in Abuja.